I want to welcome you all very warmly and say how proud we are in the Socialist Workers' Party to be holding this debate or discussion today. Everybody knows that all eyes are on Greece, and there can't be a more important question in world politics than the events in Greece that are taking place. And I think it was best expressed, if I can quote from Socialist Worker last week, by an unemployed worker on the protest last weekend who said, "We've made it to the finals for the European Championship of Class War." Okay, we have two fantastic speakers tonight. We have firstly Stathis Kouvelakis, who's a Central Committee member of Syriza and a member of the Left Platform, and no doubt many of you will know him from his extensive writings about Greece. We then have... Thank you. We then have Alex Callinicos from the Central Committee of Socialist Worker, and also known extensively for his books and writings. It does say it's a debate. I think it will be one of the most interesting discussions taking place in Britain this weekend. So with no further ado, I should say, for those of you who haven't been to one of these events before, each of the speakers is going to speak for an absolute maximum of 20 minutes in order that we get as much discussion and debate from the floor. There will be speakers' slips going around, so please fill those in. That's to try and get the broadest amount of discussion and debate possible. So with no further ado, thank you very much for coming, Stathis Kouvelakis, and you.
Comrades, let me start with this nice quote indeed that was just mentioned of the unemployed workers. It is absolutely true that we went to the final of class struggle, of the championship of class struggle, but I'm afraid that we have lost the match, or at least that we have lost this match. I would like to come here and bring positive news, but unfortunately this is not the case. As most of you probably know, the Greek Parliament voted yesterday the proposal that will be submitted tomorrow by the Greek government to the Eurogroup. And this proposal amounts to no less than to a new austerity package, only slightly modified, and this is perhaps even more shocking, only slightly modified compared to the austerity package that was proposed by Mr. Juncker a couple of weeks ago, and that was massively rejected in the referendum by 62% of the Greek people on the 5th of July. This is clearly a completely disastrous outcome of a political experiment that gave hope to millions of people struggling in Europe and elsewhere, and of the most interesting, I think, experiment in left-wing politics we have since decades. The consequences of this will be, of course, far-reaching and are, at this stage, unpredictable, both for the left, for the political landscape in Greece, and more broadly in Europe. And, of course, as you know, in cases like this, the most important thing to understand in order to go ahead is to analyze how did we get there, what are the causes actually at work behind this very negative outcome. Before starting, I would like to make one methodological remark about what, in my opinion, we should not do in those circumstances, what we should not do in order to be able to approach in a productive way the difficult situation we have to face. The first mistake I think we should avoid is to repeat ready-made formulations and certainties that have been used innumerable times in the past, sometimes rightly, sometimes less so. And to be more concrete, I will give you a couple of examples of what I mean here. Let me start with the first kind of ready-made analysis. What we have seen in Greece is totally unsurprising. It's the old story of reformism. Reformism is a betrayal of the working class. They have betrayed, full stop, nothing new, let's move ahead. Well, I think that things are a bit more complicated because, just to talk about Greece, we had reformism in Greece. We had PASOK in power in the 1980s. Actually, PASOK dominated political life in Greece for decades, and the PASOK type of reformism is not at all associated with something negative in the memory of the Greek people, at least the PASOK of the first period, right? It is a PASOK, it was a party that took measures of general social measures that promoted democratization in Greek society. Of course, it was not about socialism, but it meant a very concrete improvement in the lives of millions of working people. And what is at stake today is absolutely not this type of reformism. What we are talking about here is about a left-wing party coming into power with a very radical agenda and implementing a variant of neoliberal policies. The second, so it's a more general point that we have to make, I think, about what reformism and social democracy mean currently, not 50 or 70 years ago. The second has to do with the notion of betrayal itself. I don't think it is a particularly useful category to understand political processes, and personally, I think I have been close enough to that specific situation to say that it's not very helpful. The notion of betrayal usually means that, there is a kind of pre-established plan that comes into fruition. These people have somehow manipulated public opinion, their own party, activists, etc. They come to power and then they betray because this is what, that was the plan. This is what they wanted to do. So, they are selling out, but this is, I don't think at all that this is how things very concretely happened. I think that what happened in Greece is the failure of a political strategy. I'll analyze in a moment. And when we say that a political strategy fails and fails entirely, it means that at the end of the story, we are left only with bad or disastrous choices. And that was indeed the point we went just now, or at this precise moment. Now, the last, I think, methodological mistake is a bit different. I think that even if much broader theoretical issues are at stake in this situation, we should first start, at least, if you like, by the concrete analysis of the concrete situation. Let me illustrate this point. We had a very powerful, I think, discussion with Alex in February on the Greek situation. And some of the points raised by Alex at that moment were those about the state, the role of the repressive apparatuses and how we should break with that, and also the role of alliances, and more specifically about the participation of the party of ANEL, of independent Greeks, in the government. I think that these are two very important points, of course, but I don't think that they can explain what has happened now. I don't think that the surrender to the demands of the creditors can be explained by, the way Syriza dealt or not dealt with, defense, with issues in defense policies, or even in issues of concerning the repressive apparatus of the state. Although the record of the government on that matter is a very problematic one, and I also don't think that the ANEL, and we saw that, played any significant role in reaching this point in the deal. Actually, the ANEL, although all their deputies voted in favor of the proposed agreement, were quite reluctant actually to the surrender for their own reasons and following their own logic. So once again, I think that the central issue here is that we need not some kind of general and in a way quite superficial point about reformism or betrayal, all these kind of things, but a very concrete analysis of what was strategically at stake here and now in the Greek conjuncture. So let me here start with a brief recap of Syriza's strategy. Syriza came into power with, in a way, a very clear and simple mandate by the people: break with austerity politics and liberate the country from the burden of an unjust and unsustainable debt. its core commitments were included in what we can call, in our tradition, a transitional program, which was the Thessaloniki program, so a set of core commitments on how to break concretely with the austerity politics as they have been applied in Greece in a very ferocious way with the memoranda of the last 5 years. This strategy relied on two pillars. It was, first of all, based on a dissociation between the issue of the debt and the issue of the break with the austerity, the framework of austerity. On the issue of the debt, it was about renegotiating the debt on the model of the 1953 London Conference on German debt, but without excluding unilateral moves in case of a failure, although this last point was clearly somehow put aside, at least in the discourse, this last period. Concerning the break with the framework of austerity, the idea was that the core commitments of the Thessaloniki program, which once again was a kind of transitional minimal program, if you like, should be implemented independently of the negotiations going on with the creditors and with the European Union. Needless to say that not only with hindsight, but as many people inside Syriza, and of course in other sectors of the radical left in Greece, had warned from the outset, this strategy proved completely unrealistic and unviable. Concerning the debt, it was absolutely clear that the creditors would accept no discussion or even mention of the word cancellation or writing off. At the very most, they would discuss about a restructuring, which is no real solution because it only marginally alleviates the burden of the debt. And even that restructuring would come only after the acceptance and the implementation of a further austerity package, once the continuation with the type of policies that have been applied was guaranteed in a way. Concerning now the implementation of the anti-austerity measures of the Thessaloniki program, which supposedly was going to happen, in any case, that proved a complete illusion because the whole calculation was that they would just, observe, leniently or not, a left-wing government putting into practice its policies and giving, of course, an example to the entire Europe that yes, it is absolutely possible to break with austerity, and you see it can work, and so on. Of course, this is not the way things happened. The adversary reacted brutally, immediately, and with the most powerful way it had, the weapon of money, of liquidity, of the currency, if you like. Indeed, only 9 days before the elections of January 25th, Mario Draghi, the chair of the European Central Bank, cut the main channel of liquidity provision to the Greek banks. And from that moment onwards, actually, the country has been submitted to a severe diet in terms of liquidity, which, as you probably know, became a total stop 10 days ago when the referendum was announced. The consequences, of course, of that strategy were absolutely devastating for the economy, for the state of the public finance, and more generally for the balance of forces between the Greek government and the EU. It was absolutely clear, therefore, that some unilateral move had to be done, but it wasn't actually. When the Greek government decided to stop repaying the debt in early June to the IMF, this decision came too late when the public coffers were already emptied, and when the government had already entered, since the agreement signed with the European Union on February the 20th, a descending spiral of concessions leading to further concessions, leading to even further concessions, and leading, perhaps first and foremost, to demobilization and social passivity. So there was a fundamental illusion behind this, and the fundamental illusion was that you could get something out of negotiating with the European institutions. Hence, of course, the lack of a plan B, the consequences of which are very toughly and devastatingly felt now. The plan B, which means an alternative plan about what should be done if the negotiations came to a deadlock, the way exactly they did, and everyone knew that a plan B had to be considered, had to consider very seriously, at the very least as an option, exiting the Eurozone, was put out of the table by the Syriza government and the majority of the leadership of the party as a sign, supposedly, of goodwill and of good faith in the European institutions and in the will to negotiate and to respect the rules of the game. But exactly, there are no rules in that game, and this is perhaps where the core of the problem lies. There was something which is indeed some kind of belief, in the religious or in the ideological sense of the term, of the government and of the leadership, in the benevolent nature of the European institutions, and in the possibility somehow, to turn them around positively, the scenario of the good euro. If you change the balance of forces in one country, if you take advantage of existing contradictions and of an international movement of sympathy and solidarity, you can bring, a kind of positive change in the set of policies without breaking with the Eurozone. This ideology, which I think is now shared by most of the forces of the European radical left Europeanism, if you like, is at the root of the problem, and the defeat we are facing in Greece has to do with the failure of that strategy. That's fine. We are paying the prices, the price of that. We are paying the prices of internalizing this ideology of left Europeanism, which I think, but this is open to debate, should itself be considered as a symptom of a more deep ideological defeat of the left as it emerged from the defeats of the revolutionary experiments of the 20th century. In conclusion, of course, I will try to give some elements, as much as I can, to the question I think most of you, if not all of you, are asking now. What will happen? What are the perspectives? I think that concerning the political project of Syriza, we have reached a point of no return. Syriza as a political project cannot continue in the way it did until now. This is the moment of a decisive break. As you may know, in yesterday's vote in Greek Parliament, the government lost its own majority with only 145 deputies of its own coalition out of 162 voting in favor of the proposed agreement. The 17 members of MPs of Syriza, all of them are Syriza's MPs, who didn't vote for the agreement, cover a range, actually, of positions within the party, going from the President of the Greek Parliament, Zoe Konstantopoulou, some other personalities, and a core of MPs of the left platform. 15 MPs of the left platform voted in favor of the proposed agreement in order not to lead to a loss of majority for the government, which actually did happen, but issued a statement saying that they are in solidarity with those who didn't vote and that they would not accept a proper austerity package as such. The left platform also issued an alternative proposal of another way of breaking with austerity, which puts the question of Brexit and exiting the euro at the very center of the discussion. Greek society these last weeks lived an extraordinary moment, which now unfortunately seems in a way far away, but it hasn't waned or disappeared. It was the experience of the referendum. The referendum was a popular victory, and the referendum testified of the fact that large sectors of Greek society, in the working class, in the youth, in the popular classes, and in large sectors of the fighting left, are ready and prepared to give a fight. And this capital should not be wasted, should not be lost. It should be brought into fruition in a much more difficult context now, with a government that we know in advance will be little by little digested by the logic of managing neoliberalism. At the political level, I think it's absolutely crucial to regroup all the forces which have drawn the lessons of what had happened in order to open up a new path for the Greek radical left and for the forces of socialism and social transformation. I just want to finish with the following sentence. You might know that I work and teach as a political theorist, and I have also worked on Marxist theory. An author who is particularly dear to me and very central to my work is the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Every time I was mistaken, it was because I haven't been sufficiently radical." And I fully share this quotation, provided, hold on, there is a catch here, there is a catch. And the catch is that radical, for me at least, doesn't mean the repetition of the old recipes, but as one comrade, actually, the speaker of Syriza's parliamentary group and prominent member of the left platform, Stathis Kouvelakis, said yesterday, opening up our wings to the unknown. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stathis. And now Alex will reply.
Okay, thanks, Stathis, for posing the questions with such clarity. This is the second, as he said, this is the second debate we've had, and we have really good timing. The first time was in February, just after the Syriza government's first deal with the Eurogroup, the Eurozone finance minister, and now we're debating just after this terrible parliamentary vote last night. There's a close connection between those two moments because the Brussels agreement of the 20th of February was the beginning of the process that we've seen now completed, with the Syriza government capitulating to the EU's programme of austerity. Now, I say that I think it's very important to say that I'm as unhappy about this as Stathis is. This is a moment of terrible setback for the left and the working class in Greece and in the rest of Europe. There's nothing, whatever position we've taken in different debates, there's nothing to celebrate about here. But I think that the fact that we're talking in a moment of setback doesn't alter the fact that what we've seen in Greece since the elections in January represent the most important experience of the left and the workers' movement in Europe since the Portuguese Revolution 40 years ago. And that was the high point that the class struggle has seen in Europe, when we saw workers and soldiers marching in the streets under revolutionary banners. That hasn't happened yet in Greece, but that's the kind of benchmark that we're talking about. And we shouldn't forget what happened last Sunday. Last Sunday was an absolutely incredible moment. It was what I like to think of as a Gramscian moment. And Antonio Gramsci talked about the working class taking power through a process of winning hegemony over large sectors of society outside the working class. That's what the 62% vote, nearly 62% vote, in the referendum represented. It represented the working class pulling other sectors of society, shopkeepers, peasants and so on, behind them to reject austerity. And we shouldn't forget that. One of the most fundamental thing I disagree with Stathis about isn't any stuff about strategy or how what is the best way of being radical. It's the idea that we've just seen the final match played. I can't stand football; it bores me to death, to be honest. So I don't like football metaphors anyway. But it's crucial to understand, given what happened last Sunday, this is not the end. Now, I want to ask a number of questions about what this extraordinary experience has taught us. First of all, what has it taught us about the European Union? The majority view on the left, as Stathis said, is that the European Union is a progressive institution. Tsipras said that blackmail is not part of the traditions of the European Union. Those traditions are of solidarity and democracy. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. The EU is a dysfunctional, would-be imperialist power. It's too riven by its internal national antagonisms to function coherently, hence the paralysis of the past few years. But we've seen it's able brutally to impose austerity, particularly on the more weaker and more vulnerable economies in Europe. And therefore, when it comes, the Socialist Workers' Party is having a debate about what line we should take in the referendum that will happen in this country probably next year on the European Union. I look forward to hearing a defensible argument for voting yes. I will be arguing that we should say ohi in that referendum. Secondly, it's very important, the second lesson is about capitalism, because a lot of the commentary says that the rulers of the European Union are being irrational. These people are crazy. They haven't read Keynes. They don't understand about levels of debt and things like that. This is a mistake. The rulers of the European Union are operating according to the logic of capital. What is this about? What is austerity about? It's ensuring that the economic model of the dominant capitalism in Europe, German capitalism, an economy that is built on high levels of exports, keeping inflation low, the central bank steering the economy in a way that maintains high levels of exports, is about ensuring that nothing happens to undermine that model. That's why they're fighting so hard. This isn't about nastiness or economic illiteracy or anything about. And the fact that the conflict is so brutal and so harsh reflects the brutality of the kind of competition that is going on a world scale. We are in a historical period where capitalism is struggling with huge problems. I mean, remember those idiots who said that China would save world capitalism? Look at the Chinese stock market at the minute. Capitalism is struggling with enormous problems. Each bit of the system is fighting to maintain its position against the others, and who is paying for it? The working class. And what the rulers of the European Union are trying to do is to ensure the people who pay most are the weaker and less organised sections of the working class in Europe. We'll see whether it works. Now, the third question is to do with reform and revolution. And Stathis says we mustn't use ready-made formulas. Of course, that's true in general, but it's also true that Marxism is a theoretical tradition which seeks to embody and sum up the concentrated experience of the past 200 years of working class struggle. It's true that sometimes people talk about reformism in a very stereotyped kind of way, but there's a whole historical experience of reformism that we need to use as a reference point. Stathis' argument for saying that Syriza can't be seen as a reformist party seems to be it's not like a classical reformist party, and it's not like PASOK, the historic social democratic party in Greece, which incidentally was completely different from the classical social democratic parties like Labour and so on. The Blairite Prime Minister of Greece, the PASOK Prime Minister, I can never remember his name, the one in the early 2000s, had been involved in armed guerrilla struggle under the military dictatorship, which, on the whole, hasn't been true of leaders of the Labour Party. So PASOK was a funny kind of reformist party. Syriza, I would argue, represents the kind of version of reformism that we're seeing emerging in Europe at the present time, to the left of the kind of social liberalism of Labour and the SPD in Germany and so on and so forth, but precisely focusing, as Stathis has said, on the illusion of Europe. He's absolutely right. If you read the kind of things that Pablo Iglesias, the leader of Podemos in the Spanish state says, he puts it in terms of how we have to present an alternative within the framework of the European Union, a challenge to austerity within the framework of the European Union. This has been the reformist project that both Syriza and now Podemos is pursuing, and it has been tested to destruction in Greece. In terms of reformist reversals, this is much worse than what, say, Harold Wilson experienced in this country in the mid-60s or the mid-1970s, or François Mitterrand in France in the early 1980s. As Stathis says, a very moderate programme of reforms has been destroyed, and instead Syriza has been forced to implement the programme that it was elected to reject. Not just elected to reject, that a week ago it was campaigning for people to reject, and it successfully persuaded the Greek people to reject. This is a massive reversal, and it is a reversal, and it reflects, it's not to do with, denouncing individuals and that kind of thing. That's a waste of time. It's about understanding the flawed logic of a strategy which seeks, at a moment of profound crisis for the European Union and capitalism generally, to improve the condition of ordinary working people within the framework of the system. The relevant bit of the framework being less the nation-state than the European Union. This strategy has been tested to destruction. This approach has been undermined by this experience. The fourth lesson that Greece tells us about is about the question of a party. Stathis, the last time we debated, Stathis spoke very well about the distinctive kind of party that Syriza was, the way in which it involved a coalition of different sections of the left, including sections of the revolutionary left, the way in which it developed in close contact with the different social movements that have been very powerful in Greece for the last few years. Those features of Syriza are accurate, but after all that, what do we see? We see this party tested in government in really very classical forms, down to the parliamentary vote of last night. And I think that of course, Syriza has proved to be an extremely successful project electorally, but it has failed in government. Stathis, when we last debated, talked about Antasia, the front of the anti-capitalist left, in which our comrades in the Greek socialist worker participate. He talked about Antasia having been strategically defeated. But to be honest, what can we say about Syriza today? Hasn't Syriza been strategically defeated? What about the left platform? I mean, I don't think the performance of the left platform last night is anything to be proud of. In a crisis like this, the left platform has taken a position that is very critical of the leadership of Syriza, and as Stathis has put forward, has mapped out an alternative strategy. Those kinds of criticisms are ineffective unless you act. And that would mean a far greater rebellion in the Parliament, not accepting the blackmail that the government will fall, because if you accept the logic of not allowing the government to fall, then you are the prisoner of that government and its policies. And I know Stathis doesn't like comparisons with past experiences of reformist parties, but when I read the accounts of what the different MPs did and so on and so forth, it reminds me of nothing less than the Labour left under the Wilson and Callaghan governments in the 1970s. It's not new. This is old stuff. We've seen it long before. There should have been a concerted vote against the agreement, and then the MPs should be out on the streets calling for mass opposition to the agreement. If the left platform want to have a future, then they have to go out and unite with the comrades of Antasia in building a much broader and more united movement against austerity and challenging this government, which, yes, It isn't a matter of subjective badness or goodness, but it has betrayed its voters. It has betrayed the people who voted for them on Sunday. Furthermore, in my view, the whole experience of Syriza has vindicated those of us who argue that it is necessary to build a left on the basis, on a very broad scale and so on and so forth, but within that left to build an organised, theoretically clear Marxist core which doesn't act on its own in glorious isolation, but seeks to build as in coalition, in cooperation with other sections of the left and as part of larger movements, but preserves a theoretical and strategic coherence and an ability to act independently. Whereas what's happened to the left inside Syriza is they've lost their ability to act independently. It's very important that they regain that ability, but that means defying this government, breaking with this government, and going to the streets. The final thing that we've learnt in Greece is about self-emancipation. Because I want to go back to the referendum, because it wasn't just like any ordinary vote. It was something that went into the profound depths of Greek society, that, as I said, involved the working class drawing wider sectors of society behind them. It was... I mean, I've talked to people about the referendum campaign, and they say it was so quick and so unexpected that, to be honest, it was quite difficult certainly for the left as a whole, to get together an organised campaign in it. So, to a large extent, this was a vote that the Greek masses organised themselves to vote in. This demonstrates something very profound about the basic wager of revolutionary politics. The basic wager of revolutionary politics is that the working class has the capacity to organise itself, to liberate itself. We got a little glimpse of that in Greece last weekend. That's why I don't think it's over. I don't believe that what the government has done will simply demobilise and fragment everything that happened. I think that the step forward that the Greek masses took on Sunday will be very hard to reverse. That's a problem for the Greek ruling class. That's a problem for the European ruling class. But that's our hope. And therefore, the crucial thing is for the Greek radical and revolutionary left, whether they're in Syriza, whether they're in Antasia, whatever organised section that they're in, or if they're unorganised, to get together and stand up for the no's. The thing that annoys me about the left platform is they had an illegitimacy. They could say, we are the voice of the Ochi. We speak for the majority. That's what the left has to do in Greece. And if they do that, then the game is very far from over.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, I'm going to call down the first two speakers, Christine Boucher from Die Linke and John Molyneux from the Irish SWP. Christine.
Okay, I'm Christine Buchholz. I'm member of Parliament in Germany, and I just want to refer to the significance of the no vote in the referendum. So you have to look at the faces of Angela Merkel, Wolfgang Schäuble, and Martin Schulz to understand that they were absolutely shocked that that's what they told us for years, that the Greeks are lazy, that they need reforms, and that this was rejected by the Greek popular classes and the working class in Greece, and I think this is absolutely magnificent. I was in Athens in the beginning of June, and I had the luck of participating in a meeting of harbor workers, trade unionists from different ports in Greece, in Piraeus, and they were discussing how to challenge the memorandum that was supposed to come. And they agreed on demonstrations for the case that the next memorandum will be issued by the European Union. And I can't imagine that those colleagues, that the workers of the ports that face now further privatization, that they would stand still. I think they will rise, and they are absolutely right in challenging this referendum, this memorandum. But I think the discussion we see now in Greece is not just a Greek debate. It goes to the core of the discussions we have all over Europe in the left parties. We had the discussion how to position in the vote in the German parliament concerning the memorandum in February. And I think the core of the question is, do we orientate to take the power in the institution, the capitalist institutions we have now in the States, in the European Union, or do we orientate of building the resistance wherever we are against austerity and privatization? And I think this is the task we now have in Greece, in Germany and elsewhere, to stand together and fight austerity where we are.
Thank you, Christine. John Molyneux's going to be followed by Selma, I think, from France.
Comrades, for us in Ireland, what has been happening in Greece is something that we've been following with rapt attention. Remember that the Irish people and the Irish working class have been put to the sword by the Troika, the same institutions that have been attacking Greece, and that the Irish government has played an absolutely disgraceful role in reinforcing the Troika and the European institutions in taking a hard stand against Greece. So this is a huge issue for us. Right. But I wanted to respond to something else which is an issue for us and which Stathis raised, which is about the question of reformism. If you identify reformism simply with the traditional reformist parties, the Labour and Social Democratic parties, then we're in a wonderful situation in Ireland because the Irish Labour Party stands at 7% in the polls, and we're probably going to beat them in the polls in the next. They're going to be wiped out. So we have no problem with reformism. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. Reformism isn't just the Labour Party's PASOK, etc., etc. There's something else that's central to reformism, and this is an old issue, but it's whether you aspire to take over the existing state apparatus and run it, or whether you intend to try to dismantle that state apparatus and establish working class power. Now, left Europeanism is a version, therefore, where whoever represents it, and it'll be represented in Ireland by Sinn Féin, by the way, left Europeanism is a version of the strategy you're going to take over the institutions. And so they are our partners, said Varoufakis. We have to save them from themselves, he said, etc. It is the same basic idea. It is an idea that lay at the heart of German social democracy when they considered themselves Marxists, Karl Kautsky and all that sort of thing, and an idea, I'm sorry it's old, but an idea that Lenin attacked in State and Revolution. I want the German analogy as well, just having listened to Christine Buchholz to bring up here. Again, it's an old thing. But in August 1914, German social democracy, having opposed the war, having opposed the World War, when it came to the crunch, voted 111 to 1 in favour of war credits. One person voted against, and that was Karl Liebknecht. Lenin said, better to be with the 1 than the 111. And
John, you must wind up.
And 5 years later, Karl Liebknecht stood at the head of the German Revolution and so on. So but I think it's a useful event to remember.
Thank you. OK, Selma wanted me to ask a question to the two speakers. So could Gareth Jenkins please make his way to the microphone? And Selma wanted to ask, is the Greek ruling class all aligned with EU policies, and what's the implication of this for the fascist threat? Gareth is going to be followed by Panos Garaganis.
Comrades, the key question, it strikes me, is that we've known from the beginning how rotten and vicious the EU was going to be. It was there from before Syriza got elected. It made it very clear that was going to happen. Therefore, this was always going to be a test of strategy. Was the strategy going to depend solely and uniquely on Syriza gaining office, or was it going to look to the movement in order to destroy those particular forces? And that's, I think, the test that has been failed by Syriza. I think if you look at it a bit more closely, move your eyes down from the question of what goes at the top of Greek society in terms of the parliamentary stuff, look down. And sometimes people have argued that the movement in Greece exhausted itself before 2012. It could got these number of general strikes and then it couldn't do anything more than elect a Syriza government. I don't think that's true. I think there were all kinds of developments in that period leading up to the kicking out of the right-wing parties, and they continued the very low levels, actually. Of course, Samaras resigned during the referendum. In terms of things like the occupation of the national broadcaster, ERT, the question of, I think even more crucially, the anti-fascist movement, these elements show a form of politics which is not simply, do we elect a government that's going to do things for us? We want to do things for ourselves. Our priority is, in the occupation, we want no more managers that tell us what to do. We want to run things for ourselves. That is a continuing argument. And in terms of the anti-fascist movement, it's the link between fighting fascism and fighting austerity, which so terrified the last government and which I think is the hope for the future. And I think we have to therefore think. Alex mentioned the question of how quick the referendum was and how deep that went. That could only have been possible because of the prior preparation for the kind of things I mentioned. I think what that means is it is not all over. I don't know exactly. Nobody knows what the effect of that rotten vote is going to be. But I think that you can point to that continuing resistance, the fact that the right-wing parties have not recovered. You can point to all kinds of things that give us some confidence that the Greek working class will continue one form of resistance or another and save the day. I don't think it's the end of the road. I think it's wrong to simply see the vote yesterday as the end of the road. I think the possibilities are still there. We have to be modest and so on and so forth. But it does require precisely the kind of politics that Antasia, the revolutionary left, represents in Greece, a politics from the beginning, which has never been simply about let's have a revolutionary overthrow. It has also had its transitional programme in terms of nationalise the bank but under workers' control, unity in the working class, so welcome migrants. These are the crucial things that can continue to exist. The clarity of that argument from the revolutionary left, combined with looking for a much broader alliance, particularly with people on the Syriza left, I think tells us something that is a possibility for this not to be the end of the road and for the resistance to continue. And that gives us all hope across Europe.
Thank you, Gareth. Comrades, I am going to take a bit of a liberty with Panos. He's going to fly out, I think, really after this meeting. He's going home for obvious reasons. Panos is the editor of the Greek Socialist Worker, so I am going to give him double time. But to say to you that his meeting tomorrow will take place, but I think another comrade from SEC will be doing that meeting. Panos, you have the floor.
Right, comrades. What is the state of play? What conclusion can we draw? The game is not over. We have discovered that the referee is against us. And we have discovered that the pitch is not level. It's uphill. It's going to be a tough fight, but the fight goes on. We can base this conclusion on very, very concrete facts. There have been governments that have signed austerity deals in Greece over the past 5 or 6 years. Where are they now? In the dustbin of history. The question is not whether a minister or a prime minister puts his name under whatever Schäuble or Merkel have dictated. The question is whether workers will fight back. The workers in Greece have fought back, and they have shown no signs of going back. This, I think, is what we have to keep in mind. This is the basic platform for what's coming up. Of course, we have to take stock of the political forces. And I agree with Stathis when he says that for Syriza, the game is over. Syriza was a contradictory project from the beginning, based on two different things. One was the hope that they could make the forces of capital see reason. They banked on this. I mean, this was quite explicit. Tsipras made Varoufakis his finance minister, and Varoufakis was pledged to saving European capitalism from itself. So this was one half of what Syriza had to say. And the other half was offering workers an opportunity to change things through the ballot box. We vote for Syriza, that'll be the end of austerity. These two things are completely contradictory, and that's why the project is failing. But we have to keep in mind that this second aspect is important. Workers in Greece embraced the call to reject austerity through the ballot box. That's how Syriza won the election back in January. And that's how the workers won the referendum despite the wavering of the Syriza leadership. Through the fight back, through these 5 months, while the Syriza-led government was wavering in the negotiations, going from concession to concession, the workers were moving in the opposite direction. We had strikes. I mean, after such an election, for a first time ever, a left government coming to office in Greece, you would expect that it would take ages before any group of workers would come out striking in the face of that government. But they did. They did in the hospitals. They did in the ports. When the privatization of Piraeus port was announced, the dockers went out on strike. They shut down the port completely. So this is the force that gave us the referendum, gave workers a second chance to use the ballot box. And they used it. And that's how the no vote was massive. But now we are faced with a situation where the forces of capital say, no matter how you vote, we win. Now it's a question of shifting. We have used the ballot box. Now we have to use workers' power in the workplace. We have to use strikes. There's a meeting of trade unionists on Monday, led by the Confederation of Civil Servants Unions, to prepare a general strike against the deal. That is the way forward. And Andalusia is behind this call. And what we expect is from left-wing MPs of Syriza, no matter how they voted last night in Parliament, whether they voted against, abstained, were not there, voted yes, but issued a statement. There are all these variations, but there are left-wingers who showed that one way or another they are opposed to the deal. Well, we take them for their word, and we expect that they will support the strike, and they will we fight together to build a movement that will break down the deal and open the road for a new society in Greece.
Right. Sheila. Right. Right. Okay. Thank you, comrades. Right. Right. Okay, Sheila McGregor is going to be followed by Kate Mayer. Come on, let's get the contribution.
Right, I'm going to start by saying that I only wish that David Harvey and James Shallis were in this room now listening to that. Because a couple of weeks ago, I was at Dangerous Ideas, and David Harvey was speaking, and he was asked for his ideas about Greece, and it was just before the referendum, and he basically said that he would have been in agreement with Greece 5 or 6 years ago pulling out of the Eurozone, but now actually he couldn't see a way forward and effectively was saying... So I actually argued that I thought that he was leaving out of the equation, and this is good for somebody like David Harvey, something called the working class and the potential for resistance, and that was actually a real force that should say no in the referendum. The next speaker was Jane Shallis, who disagreed with me and said the trouble is that it's typical bigging up the working class and the struggle, and you don't see the difficulties, you don't see the real disastrous situation in Greece. So I couldn't come back on her, so I grabbed her on the Greek Solidarity picket the following Monday and said, what are you saying, Jane? That people should say yes to austerity, that they should say yes to Europe. And she at me and stomped off. Now, the reason I've gone through that is because it reflects the profound pessimism of whole chunks of the left that have given up on the working class movement, part of which is what is behind the whole Syriza project. They really do not see that the working class as an organised force can do it the way Alex put it, actually pull behind it other sections in society and resist against austerity. And I am so glad that Antarsya exists. I am so glad that Antarsya exists. And within it, that's, the Panos and SEC exist. Because I remember several years ago when people were saying it was wrong to have Antarsya, that once you had Syriza, you did not need that alternative revolutionary force being built in society. And how wrong that is. When Marx argued there are two major contending classes, the ruling class on the one hand and the working class on the other, he was actually saying when they know that they are up against defending their system, they will block together against working class resistance. And therefore we knew that Europe would actually stand together against Greece because they do not want the idea of resistance to catch on. They wanted to break it. Fortunately, the working class and the movement does exist, both in Greece and in the rest of the world. And, what we have to do is to throw ourselves into solidarity with Greece, whatever form that's actually going to take. And if it means that we set up Greek support committees, twinning with people in Greece and so on and so forth, we have to do that because their struggle is our struggle.
Okay. Kate is going to be followed by Naila Ashaf from Manchester.
Right, tremendous news, I think, about the meeting on Monday, because I have to say that I felt really sad to hear about Stathis talking about it all being over. Now, I'm nobody important. I'm just an ordinary working-class woman, single parent, working in a school. And I'll tell you something, you didn't want to use the word betrayal, but I know that if we were in Greece now and I was working in a school, I would have to have an argument with people about feeling betrayed, actually, on the ground. And you see, I think the real issue for us is there's a whole other sector, isn't there, that voted no, and nobody's mentioned that. We had 17 fascist bastard Golden Dawn MPs voting no. Are we really going to leave it to them to be the anti-austerity voice in Europe, actually? I really hope not. I would like to see the left platform. I think it's absolutely right that we are all on the same side. We are all anti-austerity, actually. They need to be out on the streets. It is not good enough, actually, for ordinary working people who had faith in Syriza to say, actually, it's all over, it hasn't really worked, let's just accept it all. We have seen that tremendous vote last week that gave hope to all of us, and frankly, hope to people like me in my workplace, where I have all sorts of arguments about Europe, all the rest, and there is a raging argument from what I can see on the left, which actually shows an awful pessimism in the working class ability to say we are not going to leave the vote about Europe to UKIP here. We are actually going to argue a socialist vote exposing exactly what those bastards in Europe want to do, and we're certainly not going to leave it to the fascists to dominate the agenda.
Now I'm going to ask Stathis, 7 minutes. each. Please.
Comrades, I didn't say that it was over. I didn't say we lost the final match. There is no final match in class struggle. But there are setbacks and defeats. It's very easy, it would have been, in a way, facile, on the other hand, of course, perhaps crazy, to come here and to say that, this is just a setback, I'm a Central Committee member of Syriza, and I feel fine because, there are many more struggles. I mean, that would have been totally dishonest, I think. So, obviously, I'm active in socialist politics since 35 years now, and this is certainly not the end of my personal involvement, and it's certainly, of course, not the end of the film. But we seriously have to think about what has happened. So very quickly, a few thoughts about the questions raised during the discussion. First of all, concerning reformism. To sum up the way I see things, you may agree or disagree with that. I see reformism as a kind of coherent political project that seeks to improve the conditions for the working class and to obtain material and broader gains for that class within the framework of capitalism. It sees a kind of social compromise with capitalism that is partially but concretely favorable to the working class. This is a project that worked for several decades in Europe and elsewhere, actually, with, of course, its own structural limitations. It cannot go beyond capitalism. It would be totally foolish in a way to ask those parties to go beyond capitalism. This was not what their project was about. Their project was about, to sum it up very quickly, to build a welfare state and to preserve it. Historical reformism, okay? Or re-establish or go back to that, right? So Syriza doesn't have the same cohesion. You may like it or not, but as an identity, Syriza is an anti-capitalist party. It is a party that seeks to overthrow capitalism and to go to socialism, and it defines socialism as the socialization of means of production. Now, you might say, what is the relation between this and what is happening now? Well, I think that here, the analysis that Panos made is a very useful one. There was an internal contradiction in Syriza, and there still is, of course, an internal contradiction in Syriza that you don't find in, if you like, typical reformist parties. Okay, I don't want now to argue, about the term. And the contradiction is that, on the one hand, Syriza is a party which is rooted in social movements, has objectives of radical social transformation, played a successful and positive role in the political and social struggle happening in Greece during the last period. And this is, if you like, the reason why it became the main expression of the search for the people of an alternative in the current situation. Because I wanted to ask you, what does it mean exactly to be vindicated in politics? I can say that from the outset, I have written perhaps, 200 pieces since the start of the crisis. I personally have always been very clear about the fact that I don't believe that you can break with austerity within the framework of the European Union. And I was not alone in saying that, okay? The whole left platform was on their positions. Have I been vindicated now? No, I haven't, because this line hasn't prevailed inside my own party. So I'm asking, those, of course, the Antosia comrades who were sharing the same positions have likewise been vindicated, analytically, if you like. Have they been politically? No, I'm sorry. They are now as weak as they were at the start of the crisis. This is, for me, if you like, the absolutely crucial test. So we have to understand concretely what is happening, what is the concrete balance of forces. Otherwise, as it's very easy, it's very inspiring to have nice slogans, etc. But in a situation like this, we really need to think about what is going to happen. There is an absolute danger, of course, that I think can be avoided, which is the fact that with Syriza's leadership, or the majority of its leadership, and the government surrendering to the demands of the creditors and the EU, the fascists might appear not only in Greece, but elsewhere in Europe as the only force which, in a kind of radical way, fights the existing, system and even austerity in a way, and even is in favor of exiting the euro. This is the position of the fascists in France, for instance, with Marine Le Pen. So it's absolutely crucial in this circumstance for the left to regroup its forces, and everyone understands that there is something absolutely major here at stake in Greece, in all the forces who fundamentally fight on the same side. Panos mentioned the strike of AVV, and Panos would certainly be able to confirm that in AVV nearly all the Syriza comrades in the boards and in the main unions, and they are many. The most radical and important union actually in Greece is the Union of the Teachers in Secondary Education, and there is a Syriza majority there, in a relative majority. Most of these trade unionists are left platform activists, and more particularly in AVV. And I'm absolutely certain that they will give the battle. So we have many battles ahead of us. The left alternative in Greece, I think we have important elements that already exist. There was a question about a left alternative policy in Greece. I think that Syriza MP and Marxist economist Kostas Lapavitsas has produced a very interesting body of work, which actually provides the basis of the alternative proposal of the left platform in the current situation. And on the other side, I would agree that we cannot continue the way we did so far. Being a tendency within a party allows you to do a certain number of things in a certain situation, but of course puts certain limitations on what you can do. These are not things you can judge abstractly. And I want really to say to the people, I have to end, well, in a way, just, do better than what we did concretely, right? And what I would say collectively now is that we should certainly do better in the future, drawing lessons from what has happened. Thank you.
Clearly, Stathis and I have a disagreement about how to characterise reformism. Stathis draws a very sharp distinction between the kind of politics that Syriza has, as he puts it, as an anti-capitalist party, and the kind of focus on building a welfare state and concrete reforms and so on, characteristic of let's say post-war social democracy. I just don't see as sharp an opposition as he does. I mean, in its heyday, the Labour left, from the 1940s through to the defeat of Benism in the early 1980s, they had a critique of capitalism. They put forward a socialist alternative. One of Tony Benn's main books was called Arguments for Socialism. He saw the kind of programme of reforms that and the strategy associated with it that he was fighting for in the Labour Party in the late 1970s, early 1980s, as being a strategy for socialism. And I think that often because, partly precisely because they're reformists, they were often very unclear about what they meant by socialism. Was it a qualitative difference from capitalism, or just a sort of continuation of the logical culmination of the kind of reforms that they were advocating? We can see this already beginning in the debates in the German Social Democratic Party at the beginning of the 20th century. So I don't see the kind of sharp divide that Stathis does. What I think I would say that it's certainly true that Syriza comes out of very radical struggles and ideologically is dominated by forces that see themselves as Marxist to an extent that is just unprecedented in recent times. And you can see this in the media. The media find it bizarre. There are all these Marxist professors. We didn't know there were that many Marxist professors in the world, and they're all ministers of finance and God knows what have you. And ideologically, Syriza is a much harder party than, traditional social democratic parties and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, Stathis and Panos agree. Syriza's strategy was one for overcoming austerity within the framework and operating through compromise with the European Union. To me, that's what reformism looks like now. That's the concrete shape that reformism takes in Europe, serious reformism, as opposed to the social liberal variant. I would just say that it's absolutely true, as Stathis says, that he and Kostas Lapavitsas have been very clear in criticising those contradictions. And I think it's very good that there's a left inside Syriza that has been challenging the leadership. Think how depressing it would be if everyone had just said to Tsipras, yes, Alexis, whatever you say, and so on and so forth. But now is the moment of truth. And when Stathis says, just being intellectually right doesn't mean you're vindicated, of course that's true, but successful politics is partly about taking a risk, about gambling. You bet on history. What did Lenin do? Let's really raise the stakes. What did Lenin do? Lenin bet on history in 1917. And I think that's what the whole of the radical and revolutionary left in Greece needs to do. Not just, the people in Antalya, but also the comrades inside Syriza who are opposed to this terrible agreement. They need to bet on history and to have a sense that they can win despite this reversal. And I'm glad Stathis has moved away from the end of the match to the end of the film. Much better metaphor. But the film isn't over. Of course this is a setback, and of course it can have very damaging effects. It can, the comrade who pointed out that Golden Dawn voted against the agreement, that's very significant. You can imagine a scenario, more impoverishment and demoralisation, and Golden Dawn builds out of it. I think that if there is a deal, and let's remember, all the voting and so on in Athens is about what Greece does. It doesn't mean that those bastards in Brussels and Berlin will sign up to the agreement. They may want to force Greece out of the Eurozone in order to show what happens to you if you dare to defy the European Union. So the deal hasn't been done yet. But if the deal is done, then there'll be quite a lot of people who've been queuing outside banks who will be relieved, and so on and so forth, and that will make things a bit easier for the government. So I'm not saying rah rah onto the revolution. It's all clear cut and so on. But I think, in a way, what up to now, what we've seen have been the rehearsals to the real struggle. Now we have a Syriza government that has committed itself to implementing austerity. The implementation of that austerity will define the terrain of struggle, the implementation of privatisation, the people who aren't going to be allowed to retire when they expected to. All this can have explosive consequences in the workplaces. And given the extent to which what we've seen is the Greek working class giving a lead to the rest of society, the workplaces can be the crucible in which the outcome of this great crisis is finally resolved. And I think the whole of the radical left in Greece, wherever you're placed organisationally, have to bend their efforts to ensuring that those struggles lead to the defeat of austerity.